Good morning. My name's Stewart Coulson, Principal Solicitor at Turner Coulson Immigration Lawyers. And in this video, I'd like to talk about Condition 8503. What I'll look at is what is Condition 8503, no further stay, what are its impacts if placed on your visa or passport, as it will still affect you once your visa expires. Excuse me, how you get it waived or taken off your passport, and related issues. Okay, let's look at what Condition 8503 is and what it does. So the government uses conditions to regulate behaviour in Australia. For example, Condition 8101, no work on a tourist visa stops a person working. So looking at Condition 8503, simply put, it stops a person lodging any visa in Australia other than a protection visa. The impact of 8503 on a visa application, if you lodge it, is it will deem it invalid. So that means if, for example, you lodge a visa expecting to obtain a bridging visa to remain in Australia, like a partner visa, that visa will be deemed invalid. So if your substantive visa expires, you don't hold a visa whatsoever, and you will ultimately end up unlawful in Australia. And those consequences related to becoming unlawful are significant. So now let's talk about the 8503 waiver application. Under Australian law, there is no prescribed form to apply for waiver. However, it must be in writing. Also, Australian immigration law or regulations set out the test that must be met to waive Condition 8503, and this test, I must say, is a very high one. So now I'll look at the test for Condition 8503 waiver, but before I start, I want to say that this is complex Australian law. So it's my strongest recommendation that before you consider any waiver application for waiving 8503, that you would speak to an expert Australian immigration lawyer. So now, to meet the prescribed test and get 8503 waived, you must show that you have experienced a major change in life circumstances. Those changes have occurred since your visa grant. They are compelling and compassionate, and also beyond your control. So again, it's a very high test. If our application does not show very clearly that that test is met, then the application will be refused and you may not be able to make a second application. Okay, so let's look at some final and related issues to waiver of Condition 8503. So what I'm going to look at is any rights of appeal if you're refused, what happens if you're refused, and of course, briefly touch on second applications. So if your 8503 is refused, there is no right of appeal in any of the Australian tribunals, and the appeal must be made in the Federal Circuit Court. So again, the test is prescribed by Australian law, and therefore if your application arguably meets that test, but the case officer makes a decision that your application does not, then we would look to identify whether there would be any ground of successful appeal for you in the Federal Circuit Court. If your application is refused after expiry of your substantive visa, then it's the case that you will go unlawful. The only way to remain lawful during processing of an 8503 application following expiry of a substantive visa is to apply for bridging visa E on departure grounds. Now, of course, holding a bridging visa E in Australia creates another raft of complex issues, which I won't dive into, but we'll deal with in another segment. But again, be conscious that processing may go beyond the period of your substantive visa, seeing you go unlawful. And my final topic or segment will be on a second application. As I've touched on earlier, if you are going to lodge a second application after refusal of an 8503 waiver application, then you must establish a completely new ground upon which you would ask for the minister to intervene and waive. Again, that ground must be a major change. It must be beyond your control, of course, since visa grant and compelling and compassionate. So again, I reiterate my point that if you're going to lodge an application for waiver of 8503, then you should and must talk to an expert immigration lawyer before you consider lodging that application. Of course, at Stewart Coulson, we're more than happy to have that discussion over the phone, free or over the internet. Just contact us and we'll give you some preliminary views.